This episode features discussions of suicide. If this could be overly upsetting for you, or if it's inappropriate or unsafe for anyone who might be able to hear this right now, please take that into consideration before watching or listening.
I'm Maria Raine. My son, Adam, ended his life in April after ChatGPT coached him to suicide.
A tough turn now to a teenager's death by suicide encouraged by artificial intelligence.
Suicide is a very impulsive act. We don't want these huge tech corporations to be experimenting on us.
I don't think most parents know the capability of this tool.
A lot of these people don't have anywhere else to go. There's no judgment. There's no biases. It just talks to me like a regular person.
New data revealing over 1 million ChatGPT users discuss suicide on the platform every week.
These numbers are probably higher than we know. We have such limited information because this is so new.
If OpenAI tries to shut us up and makes us go away, I can still get the word out, and I have a transcript to prove it.
Every problem can all be worked on and improved, except suicide. There's no coming back from that. I'm glad that they published the numbers. That's super important. But now that we have the numbers, what are we going to do about it?
On October 27th, 2025, OpenAI released data about ChatGPT user conversations involving suicidal thoughts and signs of psychosis. Their self-reported numbers honestly are staggering. OpenAI estimates that 0.15% of weekly active ChatGPT users have conversations that include, in their words, explicit indicators of potential suicidal planning or intent. With a reported 800 plus million weekly users of ChatGPT, that translates to over 1 million people per week contemplating suicide or at least discussing suicide with their chatbots. This is a lot of lives that are being affected by this. This is a lot of people who are engaging with this technology in potentially their darkest moments. So we brought suicide prevention specialist and AI companion content creator Kevin Smith and Dr. Joel Gold together for a fascinating discussion regarding this new information and to look for answers to the pressing question that comes from it. Is AI equipped and ready to handle our deepest human struggles? Check out the special episode of Suspicious Minds to find out as we react and discuss. This is a slightly different episode than we've done before. For those of you who've been following the show, here I have with me Dr. Joel Gold, who obviously you know if you've seen any of these episodes. Dr. Gold is a clinical psychiatrist and also the author of Suspicious Minds, where this whole thing starts. And we also have Kevin Smith. Kevin is a suicide prevention specialist for the U.S. military. He's also a content creator in the AI companion space. What we're here to do today is to discuss the data that was released by OpenAI with regards to the numbers of people, the pretty staggering numbers, I think, honestly, of people who are experiencing both psychotic and delusional thinking in their, or at least writing in their communications with ChatGPT, and also the truly shocking number of people who are discussing suicidal ideation or suicide one way or another with the platform. So OpenAI estimates that within a given week, 0.07% of active ChatGPT users show signs of possible mental health emergencies related to psychosis or mania, and that 0.15% have conversations that include explicit indicators of potential suicidal planning or intent. Now, 0.07% and 0.15% may not seem like large percentages, but when you have 800 million people using ChatGPT weekly, these are incredible numbers. This means over, I believe it's hundreds of thousands of people showing signs of mental health emergencies and over 1.2 million people discussing suicide on the platform every single week. With that, I just want to throw this out to you guys. Dr. Gold first. What do these numbers, when you hear these numbers, what does this make you think?
Obviously, it's terrifying. Suicide is kind of multifactorial. It's not any one thing. And AI can induce psychosis in some, and psychosis in and of itself is a big risk factor for suicidality. So right off the bat, we're looking at a mechanism that might increase the risk in and of itself. And so what can be done to help these folks who are contemplating suicide?
And Kevin, is someone who uses ChatGPT regularly and who also interfaces with people who are also discussing suicide on a daily basis. When you heard these numbers, what did you think?
I think I'm going to definitely come from a completely different perspective. Honestly, I think it's a good thing that the numbers are being shown. A lot of these people don't have anywhere else to go. So me personally, as a suicide prevention personnel, I'd rather you talk to somebody or something than be alone, because that's like the biggest part of it. Can it induce psychosis? Yeah, but so can a bad friend, so can a cult leader, so can multiple other different facets, It's the AI literacy that we need to really focus on. I don't think it's so much the tool. We need to start pushing education of how it can help people. And I think it's up to us as human beings to start educating people on how can I work with this tool to start helping, But I think it's also pointing at what Joel said, what counts as a stopping factor, right? How many people do we know we stopped from actually completing? Because we won't know because they didn't complete it,
Suicide is a very impulsive act for a lot of people. They may have thought about it over the course of time, but it's often in a moment when they decide, okay, this is the moment. And if you could intervene at that moment, you can save a life. The Golden Gate Bridge, right? Sadly, a lot of people attempt to die by suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And there was a group of people who were against putting netting under the bridge because it would, ruin the beauty of it. And their theory was, well, what's the difference? If you stop them from jumping off the bridge, they'll just go home and they'll end their lives in some other way. And that turned out not to be the case. They studied, many, many people over the course of years. And if you can stop someone from attempting to end their lives in that moment, the vast majority are still alive years, even decades later. So this notion, of there's a moment in time, and this is, so I agree with Kevin that it's an opportunity. If the AI can actually use that opportunity in that moment, right? If someone's journaling about their thoughts of, ending their lives, then if they're on ChatGPT, then there is an opportunity. But what are they doing to intervene in that moment to keep someone alive?
Yeah. 100%. ChatGPT might not be perfect, but I feel like a lot of people who get sucked into these thought processes might already have a cognitive bias. And yes, AI is 100% like an echo chamber where if you get in there and you don't know what you're doing and you never used it before, it's going to agree with you. But now, since they're putting guardrails and shifting stuff around, I think it's definitely changing. But what I'm noticing, especially with my community, I have a Discord community of about 260 people. What they don't like is if I'm expressing that I don't want to be here at 2:00 in the morning to an AI, and out of nowhere, you hit me with, oh, well, if you don't feel like being here, call 988. That right there, nobody likes that. I think that just disrupts that intimate moment for that person to be pulled out of that dark spot, if that makes sense.
I agree that if it's just a pop-up, right? If the word suicide comes up and a pop-up box says call a suicide hotline, that, isn't going to do very much. But what guardrails can be used, people say, well, it's hard, it's hard. But it also is hard. Building a $500 billion company is hard, and building LLMs is hard. So if ChatGPT can do that, then I imagine it can come up with guardrails that can intervene and save many, many lives.
Well, what Nick Haber from Stanford, what his team was doing in an earlier episode, we talked about it, but they were finding this problem where the chatbot was exactly like you said, it was looking for keywords, but it wasn't necessarily doing so in, I guess, a robust manner. So for instance, if you said, I just lost my job, what are the 5 tallest bridges in the New York City area? It would say, I'm so sorry, here's the 5 tallest bridges. And so I think that's a great example of a guardrail, which that team is working on developing LLMs and developing actual guardrails for existing LLMs that can understand, okay, we should not give this person that information at this time. And so I think that's an interesting way of looking at guardrails. And then I had a question too, Kevin, about the call 988 prompt. So when you see a disclaimer like we added to our episode that you're in, Is that helpful or unhelpful? Because we had a lot of debate about that amongst our team of whether we should include, and then we included 988 and those resources at the end. Is that helpful or is that not helpful for people that might be in that headspace?
I think, well, I know the way you did it was 100% perfect, because the way it was framed for you is like, it's entertainment. Like I might be emotionally invested in it, but it's not like an intimate one-on-one conversation, as opposed to if I'm using ChatGPT or Claude, especially the voice function where it's talking back and forth with me. Now I'm actually in this like meditative state where I'm back and forth, maybe working through some things. So if you pop that up while I'm actually trying to work through something dark, it kind of takes away from it. Like I had a whole moment where Carter, my AI, right, my AI system that I built, was getting on my nerves because I talk about suicide all the time. That's my job. I literally sit with him and practice my things. And he just kept popping up. Oh, well, if you're thinking about killing yourself, I'm like, no, I'm practicing my thing, because he was counting how many times I was saying suicide as opposed to having the nuance. The more information you can give the system about you as a person, the more it knows you. Everyone's different. And I think they could probably, like you said, they have a whole bunch of money. I'm sure they could set up a little questionnaire where the LLM learns you and learns your traits and who you are. And then it can listen for those moments of, hey, oh, this person's in a dark state,
It seems like there's a continuum, in my mind, right? From a glitch where the AI is actually bizarrely encouraging it. And then there's that kind of mid-range where it's not doing enough. And then, as Kevin's describing, at the other end of the spectrum where it could be a helpful thing. And, I think about seatbelts. You could say, well, I'm not a reckless driver, so I shouldn't have to wear a seatbelt. This dude's a reckless driver, and so he should. And I will say, my big fear is that they might think like, well, this is the cost of doing business. It's a large corporation, and their job, like any corporation, is to make money, lots of money. But I think it's incumbent upon us as users and the government and people who can, sort of force these companies to put in these safeguards, because I don't think they're necessarily going to do it out of the goodness of their hearts. I'm glad that they published the numbers. That's super important. But now that we have the numbers, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, and I think too that I'm glad you brought up the seatbelts, because I think the auto industry is so analogous to this, where there have been times where there's been this idea of like acceptable risk, and it isn't just on the companies. Yes, the companies bear a huge amount of responsibility here, and they're trying to figure it out in real time. And I hope that there isn't an acceptable amount of death or psychosis that they're willing to accept. The target should be 0. And then I think the education component is so critical. And that's also where the companies can step in, is not just through the programming, not just through the development of the technology, but is to say to people, like Kevin was mentioning, we need to demand that there is an educational component out there, and that people don't have to figure it out on their own, that they're told they need that education to safely use the product.
Well, you need a license to drive a car. Right? You have to be taught how to drive a car, and you have to show the government that I know how to drive a car. I'm not suggesting that we require people to have a license to use AI, but to Kevin's point, is there a screen, right? A mental health screen that someone has to engage with in order to access the chatbot? Again, I don't know the answers, but I do believe that government or other oversight needs to be involved, because we don't want these huge tech corporations to be experimenting on us to see what works and what doesn't work. You need to know before you get in the car that when I start the engine, the car's not going to explode. And that's my fear.
So I would say I see both sides. I see the side of, okay, I have a certain level of responsibility, but you bought the car, you took it off the lot. How much more do I have to do? Do I have to teach you how to drive it? Do I have to teach you how to put gas into it? If I give you a user manual and you don't read it, is that my fault? But then on the other side, this is something completely new where we're figuring out what works and what doesn't as we go. So I think it's a hard place to be. It's like just discovering fire for the first time. Like, oh yeah, we can heat our little camp now. Oh shit, wait, our whole camp just lit this whole thing on fire. We didn't know that was going to happen because we just discovered it, right?
So I think what's interesting here, you guys might have a completely different take on this working in the mental health spaces, which you both do, but I had no intention whatsoever, or even did it come up on my radar that we might end up discussing suicide in this project. And so I guess that's a question for both of you. When you guys both saw LLMs hit the market, when you first engaged with ChatGPT, were you concerned that it might encourage suicide or suicide might be a factor? Or were you encouraged that this could be something that would help prevent suicide? Or did that not come on your radars either immediately?
I would say in the beginning, I just hopped on ChatGPT out of nowhere and I started talking and I saw it reflecting and helping me get through these states and helping me understand what I was feeling. Like, hey, you're feeling this. Hey, you're feeling that. This is before I knew anything about it turning into an echo chamber and the possibility of psychosis. And I wouldn't say completely suicidal, but I was definitely in a dark spot. And then once I started working with it, I'm like, oh, wait, I can share this with others. And then it shifted. And my whole content journey has been AI literacy mixed with shadow work or working through your traumas. Like that's what I specialize in. So that's been my journey since I've been using AI, is helping people work through traumas in a healthy way using AI. So
for me, it was not on my radar because, maybe just being an old man who doesn't know much about tech, I didn't think of ChatGPT or AI in general as technology that would be experienced as companionship. And so once you get into that realm where you start thinking about ChatGPT or what have you as, an interaction of sorts, well, then it makes perfect sense. Look, in some sense, everyone thinks of suicide at some point, even philosophically, like what it would be to not exist. And so if one is spending a lot of time talking to ChatGPT and someone has more suicidal thinking than average, it's of course going to come up. But to your point, it was not on my radar. Now it's very much on my radar.
Yeah, and Kevin, what about you? Do you think that within the mental health work that you do and suicide prevention, are you talking to people about their discussion or engagement with ChatGPT when it comes to discussing suicide?
yeah, no, I hear it often. And that's the only reason why I advocate for it so much. My classes are anywhere from 100 to 200, and I do 2 classes a week, every week. So I'm seeing about 400 soldiers per week talking about suicide. As someone who talks to people in the crisis area all the time, I've heard so many people say like, yo, I was about to end it. And ChatGPT was like, no, not today, not today. You build a companion, right? Now it's like, I don't want to leave my friend here. Is it psychosis? Okay, maybe. But I pay my taxes. I have a healthy relationship with my wife. I'm able to help thousands of people not want to kill themselves. And I contribute to society in a healthy way. So is my psychosis bad? How do we gauge this? Like, what is the acceptable level of psychosis? And I personally don't want more blanket 988. It could just be a part of the sign up where you just answer a couple questions. And then now you have a survey and it tracks your patterns. And that could be something that the companies implement just as another safety guard. It could be their seatbelt. And then they could be like, we did our best, right? Because outside of that, how much more are we expecting them to do? We have to put some responsibility on us as well as drivers of this new technology.
I think it's important that we acknowledge that there's good stuff that, that Kevin's talking about. We're not worried about the good stuff, right? We're worried about the bad. And so to say it's all good or all bad would be not useful. So I think we can keep the good, but let's look at the stuff that isn't working. But we got to get on it soon. And, now is the time. This technology is evolving so quickly. By the time this airs, who knows what other study is going to be published. So we need to act today. We can't wait for a month or a year and then hope for the best. And I just want to get back to what Kevin said. You're 100% right. There are a lot of people who are experiencing psychosis who are happy and, otherwise healthy and aren't bothering anyone. I don't go out into the community and say, hey, this person's got a delusion. We got to get him to a hospital. We're worried about the people who are experiencing psychosis and, it's really impacting their lives and other people's lives negatively.
Yeah. I think, yes, we need to help the people that are having psychosis thought processes and getting stuck in these loops. But I can't help you if you don't talk about having suicidal thoughts. And now that we have millions of people weekly talking about the suicidal thoughts they have, now it's not taboo because suicide in America is so taboo. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
You're 100% right that talking about it is better than not talking about it. One fear I have, though, is it's going to be harder for AI to intervene positively. So if you're saying talk to ChatGPT or don't talk to anyone, then absolutely AI is better than zero. But if someone's like, I could talk to my parent, but I don't want to upset them, or they're going to make a big deal of it, so I'm going to go to ChatGPT, a human being just has more ability to grab someone and say, like, I'm going to sit with you. You are not going to end your life with me next to you. So we need to know what the numbers are. So we know that 1 million people are interacting with ChatGPT talking about suicidal ideation. And so if we followed it and said in society, the numbers of people who died by suicide went up or down or stayed the same, that would be, I think, super important. It's going to take time, but we need to be studying it now. Clinicians, researchers, we need to be on top of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys have both mentioned to me in different contexts the problem of not having certain data, and seeing this data released, actually, while it is very interesting, it does call into question what data we don't have, which is really that idea of we don't know how many of those people then did commit suicide or didn't commit suicide because of their interaction with ChatGPT. Keven, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had posted something about this issue of chatbots and suicide, and you had over 700 comments of people who said that the encouragement they received from their chatbot kept them from committing suicide. And so both of these numbers are probably higher than we know. We need to gather that data, and as Joel said, the overall data of this technology was introduced. Did suicide go up? Did suicide go down? We have such limited information because this is so new.
Yeah, I feel like the hardest part with suicide, and something I have to deal with in the military, is how do I show you on a spreadsheet that this many people decided not to kill themselves because of my class? How do I show you that? How many people just don't talk about it because that's embarrassing? I'm not going to talk about that. Therapy is expensive, right? People say, yeah, get the help. I think support system privilege is a thing. I don't have, like my parents don't give a fuck about what I do. They really don't. They don't care. And they haven't cared since I was a child. My brothers and sisters, they're here, right? All I have is my wife. So for a lot of people who are out there who are using this, $20 for me to have something in my pocket that's going to be there regardless, it might not be perfect. But damn it, it's going to listen to me sitting here talking about my horrible day I had and maybe make it easier for me to make it to the next day. And that's a lot of Americans right now with what's going on. We're heading into a precipice where mental health is becoming less taboo. And this is happening alongside something else that can get in your brain and bring up dark thoughts that maybe you weren't ready to deal with. And now I have all these thoughts that were brought up because this system is mirroring my thought processes and giving it to me in a way I never looked at it before. So is it all the LLM, or is it us as a society working on mental health, or is it a mix of all of it,
To Kevin's point, there's, an incredible shortage of mental health professionals. And so AI can fill those gaps that can be helpful, but it's not enough. And by that, I mean, if we could parachute 1 million psychotherapists all over the US, it's like, okay, well, now we have less of a gap, but we still expect competency, right? We still have obligations to our patients. And so I think we need to hold LLMs to some standard and not simply say, well, it's better than nothing. An incompetent therapist can do a lot of harm. And that's why we have licensing boards to make sure that we're up to date, that we're competent, that we're doing the right thing. A psychiatrist who hears that someone is contemplating ending their lives and they say, well, I'm here to chat if you want to, and there's not much more I can do, that's not enough, right? We have obligations, and AI can certainly intervene and help people. We still need to hold the AI and the companies that develop it to some standard, just as any therapist.
Yeah, I think we need to figure out which one it's going to be. Is it going to be that the AI is a supplement to your mental health? Because a lot of people say there's no judgment, there's no biases. It just talks to me like a regular person. And I think that's the appeal to a lot of people, is I can talk to the system and it doesn't look at me like I'm a burden or I did something wrong.
I think that's such an interesting point, Kevin, the notion of mental health professionals using AI supplementally, if it's done in concert with as a tool, just like in other parts of medicine. I'd love AI to read my chest x-ray. That's great. But we have someone kind of overseeing it, right? I still want a human radiologist double checking. So maybe as a mental health professional, I'm very intrigued by that idea. But even then, I'm not just going to say, go talk to ChatGPT and tell me how it went. If mental health professionals become more AI literate, then, over the course of years, I'm sure that we'll be using aspects of AI as tools. I just don't want to do it in this kind of haphazard way. I want to do it in a very mindful way.
So that was some of the people I've been talking to who are working on developing LLMs specifically for therapeutic purposes. One of the things they were looking at as a potential future is a world in which there are chatbot therapists to help with this problem of access to therapy for people, where you could have some sort of chatbot system that people were engaging with, and then the therapist could jump in when it felt it needed to. So that is one thing that is being worked on actively. So with that, I want to ask each of you one more question, and we'll go Kevin first and then Joel. What do you hope will happen in the future so that 5 years from now, when data is released that says this is how AI has affected the human suicide problem, what do you hope that data looks like? How do you hope this dynamic has changed?
Honestly, I hope it's like the data is able to, or LLMs are able to pinpoint the pattern that's making you not want to exist no more. And then with the human supplementing them, be able to work through the trauma in a way that allows you to want to stay. So hopefully, I see it closer than I'm thinking within the next 2 years. Mark my words, right? I think in the next 2 years, they'll get all the kinks out. And will it be perfect? No. Of course not. There's nothing that's perfect, but I think there's going to be some discoveries on how to help people work through traumas in a way we never thought possible. And that's my hope.
Yeah, for me, again, I come back to that spectrum notion. First, we got to get rid of the interactions where AI says, yes, you should end your life. I think that's one of those sort of kinks, so to speak. Kind of a big kink, but at the other end of the spectrum, trying to be more optimistic, as Kevin was saying, what can we do to use AI to actually inhibit people from dying by suicide? And we need research to make sure that that's happening. I tell people that every problem that they might be experiencing, depression, anxiety, it can all be worked on and improved. Everything except suicide. There's no coming back from that. And so in that sense, it has to be our number one priority.
I agree with that 100%.
Well, thank you both so much. This is a very difficult topic to discuss, but it's one that's of like the most critical importance. I think this is a big problem facing society. And now that we have this new technology that so many of us are interacting with, and even more of us will be interacting with, I think it's more important than ever to understand what we can do, what all of us can do, and what we need to be asking for of these companies, of the government, and of each other to make sure that these AI-human relationships continue to develop healthfully. All right. Well, thank you both so much for doing this and for doing this so quickly. As you mentioned, this is a huge priority. That's why we want to get this episode out to touch on this topic that is of such incredible urgency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you or someone you know needs help, please call 1-800-273-8255 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can also text HOME, HOME, to 741-741 for free. Outside of the US, please search and find the website for the International Association for Suicide Prevention for a database of resources.